How's everybody? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Miss Magic, for the machine. Yes, thank you so much. Guys, please like the video, share the video. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel, The Real Dana. And I do have a goal, so you could don't donate via the goal, honey. Or you could just send in a random super chat. So if you have questions, comments, please send it in via super chat and share, 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 share. Hi, Hallamel. Hi, Walter, Kimberly, Calvin, Just Goddess, Regina. Thank you. Regina says sound is clear and loud. Yes. I hope everybody enjoyed the 4th of July holiday. Some people are probably still on vacation or going on vacation, extending their holiday vacation. So, have fun. It's summertime. And yeah, I appreciate you guys being here. And of course, yes, the judge will be coming on. I just spoke to him, so he'll be logging on shortly. I know the skin is glowing. Yes, thank you so much, honey. You know why it's glowing? Story for monologue. It's hot. And you know why it's extra hot? Because I am perimenopausal, right? So I get the hot flashes. But the our central air, honey, clonked out yesterday. So there's no air in the house. And I'm in the hottest room in the house. Now it's cool now, like in the 70s. I got the screen door open, so the dog is running in and out. But I'm hot. So the skin is probably glowing because of sweat. I say all that to say. Where's the hat? The hat is coming back Wednesday for my Wednesday show. The hat is coming back for the Wednesday show. And so I like to call professionals to come and fix stuff, Havoc. I guess Central Air, whoever comes and fix it. But see, my father calls a relative who, that's his industry, that's his business. He has a business. But he's family. So he came over Sunday with his family, took a look at it, told my father, you need this or whatever. Said he'll come back and fix it. And he didn't come today. I don't know if he's coming tomorrow. I don't know when the family member is coming to fix it. See, that's the thing. And then my father's like, well, I still have to pay him. No, you are not. Because if you pay him like a customer, then he needs to be here on a Monday or Tuesday with the supplies to fix the central air. So I say all that to say, I don't know when I'm going to have central air. So I'm going to be sleeping in the basement because the basement is cool. Heat rises. Yes. Thank you, Walter, for the Cash App. Yes, guys. Oh, let me put this on the screen here. If you would like to send me a Cash App, you could do so. $. Oh, this is the wrong one. $ Dana with the data. And if you want to send the judge a Cash App, I'll put the Cash App on the screen. $ Ricky L. Stone. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you, Walter. Appreciate you. So listen, it's I won't say a whole lot, but it's a lot we have to talk about. Have to talk about the Epstein files, honey. Yes. I see the judge. I'll bring you in, judge, when I see that you're situated. So we got to talk about Epstein files, honey. This administration is starting to kind of show their true colors, but that's with every administration. Of course, we got to do the Diddy update because it is some Diddy updates because I want us to kind of dive a little bit deeper with the sentencing and the Mann Act. I kind of want to touch on maybe black elites during the Reconstruction era and Department of Justice thinking about denaturalizing American citizens who commit crimes, right? But the main thing is the Epstein files. They're saying it never existed. The campaign after he was inaugurated, after Pam Bondi was confirmed, FBI head director Kash Patel, they all saying we're going to release it. We're going to release it. It's dropping. Apparently, some of the Epstein files did drop or something. Now it never existed, and he did commit suicide. And listen, politicians lie, our government lie. It's a whole bunch of cover-ups. But my thing is, when you're not good at lying, when you're not good at covering up, I don't respect that. They're not good at it. Because you should have gave us something. You shouldn't just flat out say it never existed. Because it did. So you mean to tell the Americans, people, you've been lying or you're incompetent? So yeah. Hi.
Hello there.
You look nice.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Okay, I've been listening.
Oh, before we go any further, I know you ain't want to mention it, but I did put a post in the community section on Saturday. It was your birthday.
Yeah, I saw it. Thank you.
Yeah, so everybody say happy birthday to the judge. It's his birthday month. How old are you? 90?
No.
Don't you know I have an aunt, honey? She is 92
Good
and
for her.
moving, shaking, and popping. She still works the election polls at every local election and where she lives at. She gets up 5 in the morning. She said, I'm going to work today. And she worked the election polls in her 90s.
Good for her.
More young people need to work these election polls.
Sure.
So, all right. So,
You're talking about Epstein. Look, nobody has to lie. Every now and then, especially when there's intrigue and intelligence involved, meaning I spy stuff, things happen and you just can't get into them. They have a good bust, but they can't use it because open and speedy trial would bring some stuff to light that would be very, very damaging to the U.S. security situation. So nobody gets prosecuted and everybody goes on about their business. I have had cases, not frequently, but some, not as a judge, but as a defense lawyer, where, okay, you got it. Now what the devil do you think you're going to do with it? Because, and then somebody goes, oh, hell. So what do you want? What are you trying to get? We'll make a trade. This didn't happen. I don't care what you say, it's not going to go any further because if it does, it's going to be very, very bad. And that happens a lot. You also get things with Epstein that, have you ever, I told you earlier, Mata Hari, the famous diva who was a spy in World War I. She wound up getting put in front of a firing squad and executed. Double agent type thing. People are people, and one of the strongest compulsions in human existence is the sex drive. And particularly, it manifests in those who play alpha status or have alpha status, male or female, I'd imagine. So they tend to get into all of these freak things you find in Hollywood. That was what the Diddy thing was about. Epstein, too. And there are causes for embarrassment. So sometimes what you're likely to lose is nobody's lying. They just are in an intractable position. They ran their mouth off too much and they thought they had something, and never make you move too soon, never say something too soon sometimes, and you may have to eat it because you can't do anything with it. So you've got the sex drive and what it does to get people in trouble, and international espionage using the sex drive regularly for its benefit, people talking too much too soon, and then you find out the situation where you can't do anything with it. That happens from time to time in certain prosecutions. You can't go forward with it because something else is involved that is more important than getting that one guy in jail or exposing any one number of people. There is a reality to the phrase too big to fail. Sometimes it's too important to expose, however somebody might want. And I think Epstein has got some kind of tie-in with Mossad, perhaps Israeli intelligence, and some other things that are going on. And he had the decency, perhaps, to take himself out, or somebody took him out and made it look like a suicide because what was there was just too dangerous to expose. It happens.
It happens, but I'm not buying it. But I want to
Why not?
I want to play this clip first, and then I'll tell you why.
Of what happened.
Caroline, the DOJ and FBI have now concluded there was no Jeffrey Epstein client list. What do you tell MAGA supporters who say they want anyone involved in Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes to be held accountable?
This administration wants anyone who has ever committed a crime to be held accountable, and I would argue this administration has done more to lock up bad guys than certainly the previous administration. And the Trump administration is committed to truth and to transparency. That's why the Attorney General and the FBI Director pledged at the President's direction to do an exhaustive review of all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and his death. And they put out a memo in conclusion of that review. There was material they did not release because, frankly, it was incredibly graphic and it contained child pornography, which is not something that's appropriate for public consumption. But they committed to an exhaustive investigation. That's what they did, and they provided the results of that. That's transparency.
Follow up on that,
Sure.
Caroline. Okay, so the FBI looks at the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network on Fox News.
Got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind bars. They have an operation going on right now called Summer Heat, which has our murder rate trending in the lowest direction in United States history. Their emphasis on violent crime and locking up violent criminals has led to the arrest of 14,000 violent criminals. That's a 62% increase from the same time period last year. So this Attorney General and the FBI Director are committed to putting bad people behind bars where they belong. They promised an exhaustive review. That's what they did. For any further details, I would refer to the Department of Justice.
So here's why I'm not buying it, because why is Giselle Maxwell why is she in prison if the list never existed? So
It may have something completely, it may not have anything to do with the list. It may have to do with something else. Some people you can get, some you can't touch.
it has to do with Epstein. And
Oh, yeah, that was the one that was assisting Epstein. She scapegoated. That's what happens sometimes. But I have had a case or two where I defended somebody where there was such a complicated set of circumstances that you couldn't prosecute the case because it just wasn't going to be a good thing for what might come out to come out. And that happens a lot in international intrigue. See, we've got things going on, And you've got the CIA, NSA, military intelligence, and such like, MI5, MI6. You've got French intelligence, Mossad, Saudi counterintelligence all around, and you've got a real live mess that goes on. And some of this stuff just can't come out because it just would not be feasible, and it would cause grave harm sometimes to somebody's national interest. And that depends. That's like why we sometimes in wartime, and did it in World War II a lot, during the Cold War, you turned somebody who was a spy for the other side and you turned them into a spy for yourself. You did not make a big show of having found out what they were doing, and you turned them so they became your spy. They didn't go to jail or anything when they should have, but they became more usable to your side by being allowed to stay free. See, I imagine there's probably a lot of stuff going on, and I think that had a great deal to do with why they went after Diddy, because Diddy trying to do his thing to maintain mutual deterrence with some of the entertainment industry, had blackmail information, but some of the freaks who were also holding political office or deemed vital to American politics were caught up in that too. And I think they threw him in the way they did, particularly involving Homeland Security, so they could keep him incommunicado and not of influence during the 2024 November election cycle. So that fits in well with this. And it's not unusual.
Well, Elon Musk, of course, he's trolling because he posted this. We will release the Epstein list. We just need more time. The Epstein list is on my desk. There is no Epstein list. And listen, it's a meme, it's a joke, he's making fun of them, but I get the underhand, sentiment to it, because that's exactly what they said. We're going to release the list. We just need more time. We're getting all the evidence together. The list is on my desk. Now all of a sudden there's no list. And he committed suicide. So let's not look further into that. But I think you're right. My thing is, if you are going to cover up the truth, don't be bad at it. Stop promising stuff that you can't deliver, or it may be a question mark. And on top of that, I don't think it's a coincidence that today Netanyahu met with Trump at the White House.
I don't think that has much to do with that. But you know what I do think it has to do with is why they raided Malago and tried to run that thing through with Smith, which was just a wreck, relative to he's withholding vital secrets when the president clearly, under the Constitution and the case law, has absolute final authority on what is supposed to be classified and what is not. I always have said that most likely something came to light in those documents that he did not want to surrender to the Biden administration because the Biden administration was incriminated. I ran into you out there in New Jersey when I was there, what was it, 3.5 years ago, doing that thing on the 3, not 1, but 3 Hunter Biden laptops, and some of the stuff I read in the downloads that the technician provided. There are some things that extend way out there, and it would do nobody any good if you tried to go off half-cocked and deal with them. So they may be trying to finalize what's going on. I suspect that there are going to be some tie-ins with violation of Chapter 8, Section 1324 on harboring fugitives, like so many are now. And I think there's that battle back and forth that's got a great deal to do with a chess move that some people on the far left thought they were going to be able to pull off if they got Kamala Harris Imhoff in. and used the president's authority as chief diplomat under the Constitution and the existing statutory law to declare that certain people were refugees, to give them asylum status so they could automatically become citizens without anything else and vote 5 years after the effective date of the grant of asylum, which could be theoretically retroactive back to January 2020. So right now, they would now be eligible to vote. And we've got upcoming elections coming in, which probably at the time this scheme was hatched, someone anticipated having control of everything so they could cement it for generations, perhaps. But it didn't work out that way. So now it has to be undone, and there are all sorts of embarrassments, entanglements, and spin-offs that have to be investigated. And I think the big problem is that somebody forgot how great a virtue patience is and yacked about what we have, and then found that, like often is the case, you may have it, but you can't use it.
Well, let me read this. It says Jeffrey Epstein suicide had no client list. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide and had no client list, according to the Department of Justice and the FBI. On July 7th, the two agencies released a memo stating that they would not release any further material related to the Epstein case. Quote, as part of our commitment to transparency, the Department of Justice and the FBI have conducted an exhaustive review of investigative holdings relating to Jeffrey Epstein, the agency stated in a memo, which was confirmed by White House Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt. So, the review found that Epstein committed suicide in his cell as he was awaiting trial in August of 2019. This concurs with the autopsy conducted at the time. Now, going back to what you just mentioned about midterms coming up, we don't know who was on that list, if they even have videotapes. The same with Diddy with the videotapes, with Homeland Security confiscating all those tapes. Midterms are coming up. So I think that they're just closing the case with Epstein, because whether you're a Republican or Democrat, there are both a little bit of people. There are some people on both sides, most likely on those tapes or on the Epstein list.
See, it's not so much who's important on those tapes, but if you pursue the tapes, what else comes out that is a national security matter? That's the crucial concern. Next thing, you'd have to be the biggest damn fool in hell to come up with a list like they're talking about. That would have to be inferred. You just would not produce a damning system of evidence like that unless it led somewhere where you could pretty much be sure that it would be protected. Next thing, you have the FBI involved in this investigation, and they've declared nothing to it. But I know, based on information obtained through the initial publication of some of the records of the John F. Kennedy killing matter that were available 25, 28 years ago, that Trump says he'll put out again and publish without anybody having a request.
What happened?
Hello, you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
God damn, some spam call. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Just go out and come back in. It was funny. He was talking and how it just like interrupted him. It was kind of funny. You said 47 is on the list. I think there's a lot of people on that list. And it doesn't have to be, oh, they did something. They just don't want to be associated with, I flew on his plane or whatever. But I thought you was gonna go out and come back in, Judge. I don't know. Uh, His thing is he has to go out. Let me text him and tell him to go all the way out. Go all the way out and come back in. Okay, there he goes.
What I was getting ready to say is from that James Earl Ray case that was in my courtroom for several years, other things, the John F. Kennedy assassination matters and the information that's been released, a lot of the problem is that the FBI came back with an outright lie saying there was nothing to the investigation that they were charged with conducting. And the truth of the matter is that they were implicated in the outcome. So they were charged with doing the investigation. One of the products of a legitimate investigation would be implication of the FBI itself. So that wasn't going to happen. Therefore, they said we don't have anything. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Biden era, Obama era FBI
Mm-hmm.
did not have something to do in contrivance with what was going on with Epstein. I have a sneaking suspicion that in collaboration with Mossad and other entities, Epstein was getting compromised information on American movers and shakers, helping them get their freak on, and others were using it for informational sources. So I think Diddy had the video stuff. Epstein just had his putative list, but then you had the travel records to the island and the other stuff.
And the stuff they were doing on the island. Because let me read this. Because what's her name? Ghislaine or Giselle or Ghislaine Maxwell. She was convicted of sex offender. She was found guilty of child sex trafficking and other offenses in connection with the deceased Jeffrey Epstein, and who was a convicted sex offender. So what they were doing, they were involved in some sex trafficking, child sex trafficking.
Well,
So
our chief of police here was implicated in child sex trafficking on kiddie porn in Atlanta and again in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, but they hired the woman. So, I mean, there are a lot of people that get implicated in a lot of wrongdoing things. So we do, as I said before, if I was in charge, I might say go for it and take them out. If somebody else was in charge, they might say, oh, this is too politically embarrassing. This is dynamite. I don't know if we want to have this tiger by the tail and try to hold on when we can't, because if we let go, it's going to be a real live mess. So just let it go. Let sleeping dogs lie. And I think that's got a lot to do with it. So right now, again, I think what happened is somebody was unwise in trying to talk about it in a premature fashion.
So do you think Pam Bundy is too much of a yes man?
No, I don't think that's what the case is. I just think that when the realistic landscape opened up as to what's out there, if you pursue this, it's like, ooh, wait a minute, we have to back off here. This is going to be beyond what we can do. See, sometimes situations get so big that you can't really do anything about them. All right, it's sort of kind of like this under American law. Let's say if the CIA decides they want to assassinate somebody or take out a spy or kill them all, for the FBI's foreign intelligence unit gets involved with something, they can't let that out. Like they'll come in and say, this didn't happen, forget it. But no, forget it. You see, the movies talk about that, and in that case, they actually do have that real, because that does happen. There are a lot of things that go on that cannot be exposed, because to do so would be too damaging to the national interest, as the people in authority and power deem those interests to be. And that's why they're there. They're supposed to have a commensurate wisdom, which isn't always the case, and an exercisable discretion that is used wisely, which isn't always the case. And sometimes you have to make the shot call, which is why we have in American and English law this thing called the absolute prosecutorial discretion. The prosecutor has an absolute discretion to prosecute or not prosecute.
Well, basically, I'm looking at it. This is way above all of our pay grades. This rabbit hole goes way deep with some powerful people that's beyond the White House. And we're never going to know what's on that list
You
because
might,
well, I
but
think
it has to be developed. A lot. See, sometimes you get these expose books where they're research. And like there was one that was very interesting. The name of it is Legacy of Ashes, and it was in the early part of this new century. And it was written by somebody that really got into it after 50,000 documents were released, 50,000 plus, because they timed out, and there were CIA documents, and the title Legacy of Ashes comes from a disgusted explanation of President Eisenhower just before he left office when he was on the CIA. He said, "You lied to me. You told me that this was not going on. You assured me it was not. And all you've done is left me a legacy of ashes." And he used a cussing phrase to go past that, which is where they got the title for the book from. So it details a lot of stuff in there. Assassination attempts, discussions on the White House tapes that, by the way, Eisenhower, not Nixon, started up, where Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, and some other people having a discussion in an anteroom to the Oval Office, and they're talking about, if anybody finds this out, we'll all wind up in a federal penitentiary. Who else knows? And they were discussing such things. So that happens. That's
well,
like, what do you call it? See, it's like, okay, I can explain it this way. You've heard of the Federal Witness Protection Program, right?
yes.
Okay, these are people who nominally would be hauled in front of a grand jury, and the newspapers have all of the details of the case splashed all over the front page, and it would be a show trial, and everybody would be tuned in, and people would be trying to crowd the courtroom to get in to see it. All right, but they don't. Why? Because that person is more valuable by the information that they have and being kept secret and hidden away than they would be by making a showpiece trial about it. So these things that we're talking about, the Epstein things, there's a possibility that they're right in there, like these people that have been secreted in witness protection programs, because what they know or what is revealed becomes very, very valuable for other reasons, such that the prosecutorial authority does not prosecute them, it uses them. Now, in this case, Epstein supposedly kills himself, but then again, there are a whole lot of things that go on where there's supposed to be suicides that have absolutely nothing to do with suicide. Somebody got killed. But as I have said before, murder, unfortunately, is one of the easiest crimes to get away with if you are remote enough from motive to commit the homicide.
Interesting. Well, let me play this clip here of Andrew Tate when he was on PBD. And he was talking about the Epstein files and all that.
Money is the driving force behind all politics. It always will be, because it is your primary objective to not only make people believe they can be rich, but to keep your rich people happy, to keep your oligarchy happy, and to keep them politically invested in you. So you talk about the Epstein list. I would argue it's a very similar scenario. It's all about money. It's all about who has the money and controlling the money. Is America as a country prepared to upset all of its richest people? I don't know. Is it? Is it prepared to upset all of its richest people to appease bloodthirsty brokies who don't even care about justice? They just want the drama. Another question, because I would argue that the murders that happen every day on the street are very interesting, but no one cares about that. MS-13 and all this shit, no one really cares about that. But this Epstein list they really care about. They want justice, sure, but it's a drama. It's interesting. They want to find out. They're curious. And I'm asking you, as a professional, you're in charge of a country. Your primary objective is to keep your oligarchy happy, to keep the wealth inside of your nation, and to make them obey you when it comes to sanctions and such other things, and to ensure that the US dollar becomes and stays the predominant currency globally. There's a bunch of bloodthirsty brokies on the internet who barely pay taxes who want to go through a list. Who are you going to prioritize? Who do you care about? I'm not saying it's fair. But anyone who believes the legal systems are fair is a dumbass anyway, because the legal system's never been fair. There's always been a who are you involved in all legal cases. So when you talk about the Epstein things, I sit and think it's all money orientated, because broke people like to think that rich people should be held accountable like broke people. And that's a great idea. But guess what? They're not. They're not. Rich people have a different capability to fight against legal cases than a broke person. They can have better lawyers. They have better media spin. They have PR. They have news outlets. I'm not talking about myself, because I'm not rich like these people. These people own news networks. They can affect public sentiment, which affects a jury, which affects their case. This is the bottom line of it. At the top level, at the top echelon of fame and money, legal cases aren't even about law. They're just a circus. If they pick you up, it's only deliberately to attack your image. It's not even about law at that point, like Trump. It was only to attack his image. With me, it was to attack my image. They didn't give a shit they got a conviction. They got a shit about keeping me in a country where I couldn't work, trying to take away all my money, and slandering me every day on the news. That's all they wanted to do. So you have to analyze these things as a professional and understand you're talking about the most powerful people in the world on this list, perhaps. And you're asking, why has the list not come out? I would argue that the most powerful people in the world, if they have half a brain, are talking to Cash and Pam and saying, look, maybe this is on, maybe I'm on that list, maybe I did something bad, but also look at all the good I've done. This. You want to appease a few Twitter autists, but it's going to have this consequence, that consequence, that consequence, that consequence, that consequence. And then as a rational adult, there's rational conversations to have. And rational conversations are about subjectivity and compromise. It's not about sitting and saying, that's the law, so that's what we're going to do, da, da, da. And that's what we all like to believe, that the law is the law, and we all stick to the law. Doesn't work that way.
I disagree with him. We kind of do, but in a perverse way. And also, it isn't all about money. That's a sop that's fed to the peasants. So they say, well, I don't have money. It doesn't apply to me. It's about power. And power is not always about money. Power is about the ability to vest consequences and to make determinations of how, when, and where those consequences develop. I'll give you an example. In the entirety of the 20th century, who do you think was one of the most powerful people in it who was not a wealthy individual?
What you said in the turn of the 20th?
In the 20th century, who do you think was one of its most absolutely powerful people who was not very wealthy?
FDR?
No, he came from a wealthy
Churchill?
No, Churchill came from a wealthy family.
I will say Gandhi, but no.
Well, that's one person.
Okay.
How about in terms of megatonnage?
Who's that?
How about the Trident nuclear missile submarine fleet?
Oh,
The Soviets with their Soviet missile submarine fleet. B-52 bombs,
Einstein.
20 megaton hydrogen bombs.
Are you talking about Einstein?
Einstein. Yeah. See, in other words, the whole world changed completely when he finalized his ideas, when he was riding back and forth to a rinky-dink job on a train. And the whole world learned through him how to completely annihilate itself. So, was he a rich man? No. But he signed a letter to President Roosevelt, and that resulted in the Manhattan Project, where the U.S. government committed itself that at all costs it will make the bomb first. And when that bomb was made, thanks to the formula that you can lay at Einstein's feet, the world changed forever. Now, you see what that goes. How about the collection of individuals in the 18 million person armed forces of the United States by the end of World War II and what they did in terms of power and authority? See, this thing that he's talking about is a nice sop. They're after me because they want my money. Somebody that's not doing anything, that feels otherwise entitled, helpless, or whatever, says, I don't count because I don't have the money. I was talking to somebody today that was trying to get out of jury service, and I told them they probably needed to serve because I'd heard enough conversation from that individual about how justice was so unfair. Okay, justice, the legal system is a travesty because it's not fair. It doesn't treat well off people the same. If anything, if you've been watching closely, how do you guarantee that you really get jacked around by the system? Be a celebrity and or have a lot of money, and they're going to go after you and make an example of you, and you won't get to justice unless you can pay for a hell of a legal team to try and protect you that an ordinary person is more likely to get. Because look at Diddy.
So let me ask you this though. So
$50 million worth of bond wasn't enough, and now $1 million worth of bond isn't enough for what he's likely to be liable to if the case stands up on appeal. Look at that. What did they do?
So let me ask you this question. Is the legal system fair?
The legal system is fair,
You think so?
but you have to understand it's not doing what people think it is doing. It is an expediency. We have in our system a huge problem with the criminal justice system. Why?
Why?
One reason. Everybody else in the world that has factories, computers, and high technology that is devoted to the industrial phase of the economy has something in place to deal with the obsolescence of the ordinary worker, who is the same guy that picked up, fetched, towed it on a dock, in a harbor, in a warehouse, in a farm field, things like that. He was an artisan, he was a craftsman, he made the stuff nobody else wanted to deal with. We have made him obsolete in our system. So what do you do with him? You put him out of a job. He's been on a job for 23 years. He's tried to set up a retirement for himself, medical insurance, put money away to put his kids through college, and then you send him a pink slip and say, bye, sucker. Thank you very much, not at all, for your loyal service for all these years, but we have some 40-something-year-olds who want to be billionaires, so we're downsizing and kicking your dumb behinds to the curb so they can more quickly get to be billionaires by dropping corporate expenses. Forget you, lose your house, you lose your retirement, you lose your ability to take a vacation, you lose your ability to send your children through school. Screw you. We don't care. So what do you do with that person? Well, what you do with him is that he's surplus labor, so you put him in a warehouse. Now, how do you get an excuse to put somebody in a warehouse instead of a grain silo? You send him to jail. So you have a criminal justice system that morphs from an instrument to preserve public peace, dignity, and order, to control and suppress crime, And you make it into an instrument that gets rid of people who are surplus to the country's labor requirements. And then when you set up another plan, you still have a few requirements. So you bring in a new batch of folk, illegals, who have absolutely no connectivity with the country.
All right,
And you can work that.
so here's
That's
the thing.
how that
So the question I asked you, is the legal system fair? And honestly, you kind of just laid out a case of technically it's not fair because they need more bodies in the prison system.
Well, they don't need more bodies. It's convenient, and they don't want to rehabilitate them because all they do if you rehabilitate them is reglut the labor market. The problem is that the system works fairly if you require that it work fairly. But nobody wants to pay attention to it because it's much more exciting to watch the egregious excesses on a TV drama. It's much more interesting to watch Blacklist. It's much more interesting to watch Law and Order and not deal with the individual consequences. It's much more to get somebody like what's her name, Johnson, Alice Johnson, is czar for pardons, who has, if anything, a knowledge of the criminal system because of deep participation in what the criminal system's supposed to stop. You know, did anybody bring in anyone with any expertise and demonstrated ability to actually do something with the system to change it? No, because nobody gives a damn. And when nobody gives a damn, nothing's done with it. And the element of fairness, which is supposed to be part of its essence in a country like ours, is forgotten because nobody cares. We keep talking about, justice ain't nothing but just us. But we glorify Pussy Valley, P Valley. We glorify like Beautiful Black from Tyler Perry. We glorify pimps and hoes and thievery and drug dealing. We get victimized by what goes on, the bloodshed down in the hood, but we glorify that dysfunction, and we spend tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars buying quasi music, aka rap, that glorifies thuggery, criminality, and wrongdoing. And we dance to it, and we ideate on it, and we go have sex listening to this stuff, and we conceive the
Just
next
blame
generation.
everything on hip hop.
No, I mean, I am going to blame it because hip hop is a reflection of something.
Well,
Music,
people, their work.
it's not the cause. It's not the cause. It's a reflection. And the problem is when people love to listen to something, it says a lot about what's up here by what they like to listen to and dance to.
Okay,
So
swinging it back to
that's the problem. What does that say about us? What does it say about us when we get a Maxine wastewater running around sounding like an ignorant fool, or we get all riled up in supporting a Cory Booker? Or
are you okay when you say what it say about us? Are you focusing on black people? Because
I'm focusing on all of us.
All right, and so you gotta. So then,
what does it say about
these white names, these white politician names as well? What does it say about American people?
They aren't just white.
So here, okay, so let me answer your question because I know it's rhetorical, but let me just answer it. America's, we don't care basically. So that question is: the legal system fair? You, lifetime legal expert, judge, you know how the legal system should work and how it works, you know. So you're going to say, yes, it is fair, but we are going to look at it, well, it's not fair because this person didn't get justice, whatever. But we are not paying attention to the law or our legal system. We're not educating ourselves because we are allowing ourselves to be distracted with nonsense, which is Americans. Like, we are consumers. We not only with buying things, but we consume bullshit every single day. Whether it's reality TV, all of Americans. It's American culture.
There is a lie being told. The problem is we bought into it. because you conditioned us to go for it. If I got a bunch of people together, most of them would make pretty good jurors, all right? But the problem is if you look at 100 people in an American penitentiary, just 2 of them got put there by a jury verdict. Do you realize that? Out of every 100 people in a penitentiary, just 2 of them got put there by a jury.
So the rest was by a judge.
No. 97+% pled guilty.
Oh,
And
pleaded.
84 to 87% confessed. So
What
out
is
of
the
all
percentage
of
that a judge rendered a judgment? What's the percentage of the judgment?
that's very, very small, because penitentiary time is not given out by bench trials.
Okay.
That's an exception. And usually a bench trial is agreed to by the prosecution and the defense when they know they have to proceed with the case, but both the prosecution and the defense are pretty convinced that they don't want to chance what happens to a jury. They'd rather the right judge render the verdict, because it's most likely to result in the defendant going free. I'm not talking about jail time in a county jail where it's a misdemeanor, which is one thing. I'm talking about those sentences that are nominally 1 year or longer. Out of every 100 people in an American penitentiary, whether it is state or federal, just 2 of them got found guilty by a jury. You see, most people don't think of that. And what winds up happening is, why'd you plead guilty? I was scared. I wanted to get it over with. Well, I mean, you can't expect anything to work right if you don't want to take the time to make it work. In other words, they down in, you can say Mexicans, Italians, Irish. You can say they're down in Chinese, they're down in black folk, they're down in Native Americans. But in this day and time, that doesn't work out, because basically there's education available. And if you're smart enough and enterprising enough and hardworking enough, there's no limit to where you can get to. Like right now, for example, you know who started FedEx, right? Fred Smith, typical Southern white guy, all right? He knew how to pilot an airplane by hook or crook. He got into package delivery and he hit it. Great FedEx. Basically private enterprise has taken over a lot from the American post office. Do you know who he has as the CEO? Well, had as the CEO until he died. Fred Smith died a couple of weeks ago. Do you know who he had running this huge FedEx?
Who?
Wasn't a Southern good old boy. Wasn't a New Englander. It's a Hindu. So you see where this goes? This is somebody that's recently come to America, running one of the biggest, most important corporate entities in the world, because it deals with shipment of goods. It's not even somebody who's long native to the country.
What is your point with that?
In other words, the point is, how do you get people who are not part of the mainstream running so much in America? It produces resentment, where black people particularly, they get to talking about somebody, he's not a foundational American. So what? It doesn't make any difference.
It does. It does to a certain degree.
I'm just saying, in the scheme of things, it doesn't make one damn bit of difference in reality, because the world is not predicated on being fair to somebody's perspective. It's predicated on power, ability, authority, acumen, talent, enterprise, and what somebody can do to bring forth the money. Look at Diddy. He's a billionaire.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into Diddy in 1 second.
I mean, I'm not talking about his case, but just look at him. Look at Diddy. He's dark. He's black. He acts ghetto. He goes off trying to push this other stuff, but he's a billionaire. Look at
Well,
old.
wait, hold
She's
on, hold on.
man hating. She sits there. She comes
Oh,
from Mississippi. She had
you talking
the
about Oprah?
background she had, but she's a billionaire. So you're trying to tell me that everybody is supposed to say there's no hope because you're black, because you're Mexican, because you're Thai, whatever. You can't make it in America because of what you are. But we have all of these exemplars of people who are billionaires. We have a hoe who did a porn thing with Ray J, and she is a rich little somebody who runs around half naked, and she can advise the White House on criminal justice more so than all of the folk who are into it and have devoted their whole lives to it. What does America offer to people, and how do they get where they get? When if you stood back at a distance and look at them, you say, how the hell did they get in this? They don't know anything about it, have no experience about it. We talk about a certain lawyer. He's supposed to be this, that, and the other in civil rights. Never even tried a damn case, but he's supposed to be an authority on something, and all he has supposedly is book learning, and apparently not much of that.
Well,
So,
well, first of all,
what examples?
we're not going to. All right, so we're not going to call someone a hoe. That's just your own personal opinion.
Well, it's my
But the
opinion.
fact is that
You do porn, you do
where
money.
let me just say this.
You
Let me just say this. I
You
get
do what they did for Diddy. That's what
let
they
me
did.
talk. Let me talk. I get what you're saying because when someone claimed to fame, Hollywood fame is a sex tape, and then you go from that to fame, being famous, and you create this $1 billion company, cosmetic company, and clothing company, and then you choose to switch it into law and get your way into politics. But that's America. We've had actors who were presidents of the United States. So this is how America
Well,
is. So I
you
get
know
your point.
what?
Yeah, let me just say this. Yes, there is no excuse because if you work hard, because I'm not going to sit up here and say Oprah, Diddy, and other people did not work their ass off because they did. You have to. But these are people who worked hard, who were ambitious, and they didn't take no as an answer. They had a goal. They had, wanted to set out certain achievements and they achieved it. Now, his personal life, i.e., Diddy, that's his personal life, which is a little bit off, and a lot of people would think it's disgusting and immoral. However, it's a lot of wealthy people and not wealthy people who are immoral, but these are people who did work their ass off. So I'm not going to just discredit them because you may not like the type of industry that they're in. But to get to that level, you have to, know a lot, study, and work your ass off. So speaking of Diddy, because wait, before we go any further, let me say this. I need everybody to hit the like button. Hit the like button and share this video. If you have a question or comment, please send it in via super chat. I do have a goal. So like, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, share, 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 share. So I want to go into Diddy because tomorrow at 2 p.m., he does have his lawyers, they did request a sentencing hearing. So it says Combs' lawyer requests that his sentencing not await the date the judge tentatively selected, which was October the 3rd. An issue will be when his probation can prepare a pre-sentencing report and whether the defense will accept less time to review it. So tomorrow they're asking the judge, can you push up his sentencing date from October to, I guess, whenever the judge feel, okay, I'll give you this date. It could be August. But
Let me stop you right there. Yeah, I
well,
told you this before. The judge has the option of setting the motion for new trial first or the sentencing hearing first. The October date for the sentencing hearing is predicated on the motion for new trial coming first. Sometimes the judge will do the defense the favor of sentencing somebody before they get to the motion for new trial so everybody understands what's at stake. Now, that is what they're essentially doing. They have to have the pre-sentence report in. That's always the case. So there's no way around it. And yeah, you can expedite the matter. So that's what you're looking at. It's just routine procedure. It's no big thing.
Well,
I
there's
mean,
a question I want to ask you though. Aside from that, the Mann Act sentencing guidelines.
it's not Mann Act. It's just the federal sentencing guidelines.
Well, we talked about this the other day. You brought it up, and earlier today that now everybody's saying the Mann Act, because they wasn't saying that before.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a year and a half. And now listen to me. I know what I'm
And that's
saying.
what that was the only thing he was found guilty on.
Yeah, I got it. Now, let me say something with this. What they did is the original Mann Act says simply transporting females across state lines or international borders for illicit purposes. That was 115 years ago they came up with that. So what the devil do you mean by illicit purposes? Well, some decades ago, they attempted to amend the act and they said for purposes of prostitution, which as they defined it is engaging in sexual activity for money or economic gain. But that's why I wanted to bring up Kim Kardashian and Ray J. What they have in the entirety of the Diddy matter that they found him guilty of is his girlfriend and that Jane Doe, unmentioned, but everybody thinks they know who she is. They went across state or international lines. Money changed hands. They got money from the relationship and they engaged in sex shows, essentially. Now, if they had taped or recorded the sex shows and played them on Pornhub or Xfinity Adult Entertainment, what you would have is exactly what allegedly is transpired with Ray J and Kim Kardashian. They went across the Mexican border, that's an international border as specified in the statute. There was money involved, $4.95 a hit for 25 years at major hotels, motels, Xfinity, Comcast, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's money involved. They did allegedly exactly the same thing that we spent all of these millions of dollars trying to go after Diddy for. There is no difference, except we did not get anybody slapped around with the obvious pimp game. It was a contrivance between two young individuals. So what is the difference? And this is what I'm talking about. Why do we prosecute Diddy, a celebrity, a billionaire who's not supposed to be anything except a hood rat thug with no money, which defeats the representations of what we just saw on the tape where it's all about money? It's not, because remember, this is somebody with a billionaire status. So he's getting jacked around because of what he knows or what he recorded or who he can expose. And that has absolutely nothing to do with what the person was talking about. Justifies everything, and it's not fair. It's not fair, period, because nothing in the world is fundamentally fair. I had a steak, prime rib, bunch of meat the other day. Somebody took me out for my birthday. I had a great time, but something died so I could eat it. Do you think it was fair to the sheep, the cow, or whatever it was I was eating, or the chicken, or the duck, or the goose? You know, that's not fair.
Okay, so let me ask you this though. So the Mann Act sentencing guidelines, what
It's federal guidelines, not just for the Mann Act.
okay, so what would you know anything about that type of sentencing guidelines?
Well, yeah, from what you have with the Mann Act, he's already probably got a time served situation. The first person they went after that was the initial target for all of this, Jack Johnson, got 1 year when he was convicted. He got more than that for escaping. But
Well,
you see, what are we doing here? And then I put this in context. Geithner was formerly Secretary of the Treasury for the United States of America. one of his subordinate departments was IRS, since he ran the Treasury Department. 6 months before he became Treasury Secretary, he was convicted of defrauding IRS to the tune of $28 million. He got a 6-month suspended sentence and a $42,000 fine for defrauding IRS, the U.S. government, and the people of the United States of $28 million. Now, just think about it. Those same federal guidelines were applied to him. Now, somebody that also made the news, Wesley Snipes, a personal friend of mine, who I think had incompetent counsel representing him. Judge went off on the lawyers for his defense for not doing their job. He, because of their inadequacies, and he had a lot of money, remember, he's a well-off Hollywood celebrity. He got 1 year per failure to file a complete set of documents, 3 counts, and they ran consecutive, running wild because his lawyers didn't know what the hell to do. Mm-hmm. Now, you see the difference? That's not fair, but it's not for the obvious reasons. In one case, there is politics involved. $28 million worth of tax fraud is a hell of a lot more reprehensible than just failing to file a complete set of forms, but getting a refund check for $250,000 because you overpaid your taxes. You
Right.
see how that works? That's not fair.
So let me play this clip here. See what this is.
For the first time tonight, we're hearing from one of the alternate jurors who sat through the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. The man, who only identified himself as George, says he agrees with yesterday's verdict, which acquitted Combs of sex trafficking and racketeering charges. George was not part of the actual deliberations, but said the alternate jurors saw all the evidence given to the main jury during the 2-month trial. He says he understands how the jury came to their conclusion.
A copious amount of notes overall. I think 350 pages worth of notes. Because at the end, we weren't told who was an alternate, who was the main juror until literally the last second. I think reading all my notes and looking back at the evidence, I probably would have reached the same conclusion as the other jurors.
And when CNN asked about the video showing Combs attacking his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, here's what George had to say about that.
It was a very bad video. I think they showed it enough. I mean, they tried to show it both sides.
Did it make a difference to you in the actual charges that you would have had to deliberate over? Because he wasn't charged with
He wasn't charged with domestic violence, no.
Combs was convicted on the 2 prostitution-related offenses. He was denied bail and now awaits sentencing in jail.
That's a travesty, the denial of bail. And otherwise, to remember me pontificating about the evils of proof of other crimes, that's what they did. It had nothing to do with what he was convicted of. Not one thing. But they showed it trying to inflame the jury and influence public opinion. That's not what American justice is supposed to be about. But this wasn't the case for money, because who had the money? The defendant. But again.
Okay, what happened now? Oh my God. Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello, 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 hello.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
man.
Can you hear me? Oh, you have to go out and come back in. Give us a second, folks. All right, so while I wait for the judge to come back, see, he needs to go out and come back in. Hit the like button. Hit the like button. So I have 614 likes, and we have 989 people watching. So I want to get to 1,000 likes. So guys, please hit the like button. Also, I have a goal. I have a goal. If I reach it, I will host a live call-in show, Q&A, or just call in to say whatever. And if you just have a question or a comment, or if you want to just happy birthday, please do it via super chat. Please do it via super chat. So thumbs up, share this video. Judge, can you hear me? No, I can't even hear him. Share the video on all of your social media outlets. Share, share, share. And thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Hit the like button. Like. Okay, he went out and he should be coming back in soon. Yeah, it does that. It knocks him off. I would prefer he used to hop on via his iPad, but he said he lost it. So yeah. Okay, here he goes. Because the iPad was better.
Let me apologize. That was a call. Every time I put
Yeah.
on do not
I get
disturb,
it.
doesn't. But anyway, look.
So
Let me put something to you about. I hate to run on like this, but it's complicated, and it's along this kind of thing. An appendectomy is fairly common, right?
okay.
You get a root canal. That's fairly common, right?
Yes.
You get your tonsils taken out, fairly common. That's common. Putting a pacemaker in, or
That's common for older people.
yeah. But the bottom line is what does a doctor have to go through in order to be able to do that, or a dentist have to go through in order to be able to do that? What happens when they start putting anesthesia in and they shoot you up with Novocaine, or the anesthesiologist puts you under and keeps you from dying, but keeps you under? It's complicated. So if somebody wants to understand what's going on, it's not something you can just say, oh, they just do this, put you under, and that's it. That doesn't give you anything. You still don't know what's happening, and you still wouldn't understand what happened to you. And if you want to find out what's going on, yeah. So sometimes when I go at length, I'm not trying to just be obnoxious about it. It's just, it's hard to explain simply. It's like a chess game too. How do you sit there and explain to somebody, this guy is really good at chess? You're playing here looking at what's on the board right in front of you, and he's trying to set you up for 6 moves in advance so he can get you. So he's looking at something you aren't looking, and you want me to explain the difference between what you're doing and what he's doing.
All right, so
So
let me
what
bring this
I'm saying
into the fold. Let me bring this in because um after the verdict, right, and he went back to his cell, it says Mr. Combs got a standing ovation from fellow inmates when a music mogul returned to the jail after being acquitted of sex trafficking and racketeering in his federal trial in New York, providing what his lawyer says might have been the best thing he could do for incarcerated Black men in America. They all said we never get to see anyone who beats the government. So yeah, the inmates that were in there with him applauded him because he beat the government, and Rico is it's supposed to be unbeatable, but
you can beat it.
well, clearly we see it here. And
I have on behalf of some of my defendants that I've represented. Now, this is what's going on. Like I said, less than 2% of the people that are in the federal penitentiaries, state penitentiaries, got found guilty by a jury. 97% plus pled guilty. So a whole lot of what you hear coming out from the inmates that need hope is just because they punked out and they did not have the nerve to go to trial. They were scared.
well, I hear you. Some people don't have good lawyers. A lot of people don't have the dream team. And then sometimes if you
Well,
don't
then
have
you don't,
money, you could buy you a good defense.
but you don't. But see, here's the problem. If you're broke, you get the public defender's office, and 9 times out of 10, the public defender's office is going to give you better representation than you can afford, until you can afford the very, very, very best. And even then, like with Wesley Snipes, who had a lot of money, he didn't get very good representation. See, so you get good representation sometimes, and then you get the public defender's office, which is next best to that. If you have an unlimited budget, you can get a lot of research done, a lot of expert witnesses in you don't have to pay for that. Ordinarily, if you could afford it, to not be broke, you'd have to pay for yourself, and you can't. So there's this gap. And the other thing is, some of the public defenders are not in this for money. They're in it for purpose, for causes. It's like, again, power.
So
Who was most powerful, Henry Ford or Albert Einstein? Who had the most money? Who invented the atomic bomb? You see, it gets that way. So you have people that,
okay, so here's the thing with Einstein. That doesn't mean he had power because he invented the atomic bomb.
yeah, it means it had power because the most powerful device
but then the government
he came up with
but
it.
the government took it and used it. And what power did he have after that?
Well, he's the one that told them they needed to use it. They did not know.
What
He's
power?
the one. In other words, if you know how it works, somebody may want what you have, and if you have it in here, you can control what they get to use. You can always say, I'm not telling. But as long as you keep telling, then you have a certain power. See, in other words, who was the most powerful man in the world? One of the most powerful men in the world in April 1945.
Who?
5-star general Ike Eisenhower, who had 12 million men, the biggest army in world history, under his direct command. And he was collaborating with Zhukov and Stalin on the Russian side, who didn't quite have that many people to put up.
I don't want to go far down
you
that
see
road.
what I'm saying about power, but how much money did Ike Eisenhower have in his pocket?
So I want to swing it back to Diddy because we're running low on time here. So I want to bring this into the fold here. Cassie is being sued by a former escort. So it says Clayton Howard, the former escort, who is suing Cassie and Diddy for drugging, manipulating, and traumatizing him. He believes Cassie revealed in Diddy's power, and when it came to getting what she wants,
see, that's one of the bases for the cases. If you listen to the evidence, she actually is more an accessory, an accomplice,
right,
a collaborator. And when she filed that civil suit, the Biden-Harris administration said, we've got a way to protect Miss Harris Imhoff and her ilk. We can go get her, threaten to prosecute her unless she will be a witness for us so we can get him the hell out of the way so he doesn't embarrass our side.
So apparently he was asked, well, why didn't you submit your lawsuit, right, last year along with everyone else? And he said that the prosecutors reached out to his lawyer to say, hey, can you just put a hold on it to after the trial?
Do that.
Let me finish. Can you put a hold on it to after the trial? Because Cassie was the prosecutor's main witness. So if he's coming in with a lawsuit on her and him, it does make her look bad and be more of, like you say, a conspirator.
See, if it was fair, everybody involved in that would have their law licenses stripped. That is highly
on the prosecutor's side.
Yes, that's highly unethical. I've said many times, one of the most corrupt, unprincipled bunch of scoundrels you can find are career prosecutors. Not all of them, but too many of them. There's nothing wrong with being a prosecutor, but if you spend your entire legal career doing nothing but that, something's wrong with you as a human being. And they are corrupt. And that's one of the reasons that the system does not work. It's got nothing to do with how much money you have. It's got to do with just exactly what you said. We want to win, so to hell with justice and equity and fundamental fairness. We're going to manipulate this so we can win. Because what Cassie did is revealed by that. She solicited, she procured, she facilitated, she aided and abetted. She was as guilty of anything that they found Diddy guilty of as he was.
Right.
That whole thing about her getting beaten, that was domestic violence in one sense, and it was the typical pimp game in another. And every time you look at P-Valley, Beautiful Black, or any of this thing where we glorify this pimping stuff, and the young folk talking about, man, it's about pimping. That's what you're really referring to with the game. It's brutal, it's violent, and it's got to do with some males who have a lack of masculinity, because no real man would do that. Now,
so I wanna ask you. Well, let me say this about the guy that's suing her, Clayton Howard. She has money. She's $30 million richer. So
yeah, it's a money-making proposition. And by the way,
no, but
his whole thing.
People sue you if they know you got money. And now she has $30 million. So she
Okay, but see, there is this punk factor. And I say, even if there's a legal defense to it, or it's legally defensible, or it's not illegal, there's the punk factor. Real men just don't do certain things. And if you're going to claim you got punked out, wow, what is that? You keep your mouth shut, hang your head in shame, and try to redeem yourself. You don't go around whining and try to, oh, look what happened to me.
Well, listen, well, they're gonna say, look what happened to me, if the person that they're suing it has millions.
But see, that's where you come in. When you start saying it's all about money, it ain't. That is not why people get declared heroes. They are not dying for the guy in the slit trench next to theirs. They're dying for a cause.
And
This
you're
is
right, it's not
why-
all about money, but people, to a lot of people, it is all about money, which is why
and that's why
you
they're
have these women allowing themselves to get urinated on their face and all this type of nasty things.
Remember what they have sent to us sometimes when we did some of our X spaces, some of the people defecating in somebody's mouth, and they've got that somebody participated in that. I mean, come on now. What kind of creep does stuff like that and enjoys it?
So I want to go a little
Not saying anybody involved in this would be that completely low, but I mean, it happens. So this S&M sadomasochistic thing. And by the way, with the financial resources, I'm surprised that they didn't get into that, but they ignored it, and they made the right call, apparently. And this juror that's talking here says, hey, that had nothing to do with the case. That was just thrown in. It was a gratuity, and the judge never should have allowed it. Right. He should have stripped it, ordered the jury to disregard it, and told them they were, well, that was one instruction he should have given, because the state did not tie that in. There was no need for that gratuitous proof of other crimes.
So I want to go left here. Hollywood freak offs, right? I think they're very common. And that kind of came out during the trial, because they were saying, other freak off. Jane Doe was describing, outside of the freak off she did with Diddy, she went to other freak offs in Vegas where there were other celebrities participating, and people and their wives and girlfriends. So, however, I wanna do a compare and contrast, because Diddy and Hugh Hefner, the Playboy Mansion. Is there a difference, or are they one and the same? I think they're one and the same.
He might have. I'd say this. I know his first wife personally, and they're not quite the same. It was a little bit more polite. It was
still freaky.
it was freak,
What do you
but
call it at
it
the
wasn't
with that water with that jacuzzi tunnel
it
thing
wasn't so
cave?
thuggish. It was faddish rather than thuggish.
Well, who said Diddy's thing was thuggish?
Yeah, that beating and all that pimp scene stuff.
And no, well, okay,
Yeah,
no. I'm specifically talking about the freak offs. I'm not talking about
well, the freak offs. I mean, but the whole
oh, with
atmosphere.
the I'm talking about Hollywood freak offs. When you have the Playboy Mansion, come on, that's all. That was a big
Yeah, well, the freak offs in Hollywood tended to be a little bit smaller scale. That's why so many of these celebrities have children that are freaks, is because they came downstairs.
So
they were peeping from the upstairs to look at mom and dad.
Right. Well, okay, so let me say this about Diddy. Diddy never had a freak off in his house. It was always at a hotel because his kids and his family was there. And it was always him, the escort, and whatever girlfriend at the time.
Well, they did have testimony about, but I correct you, they did have testimony about the cameras shooting into the rooms on one side of the mansion down in Florida. And what they picked up on that. So yeah,
that wasn't where it.
Well, see, that was the problem. Why in the hell is this thing in New York when most of what they were talking about took place in Florida and California?
I want to get back to the Hollywood freak offs, and I'm doing a compare contrast of of Hugh Hefner and Diddy. I think they're one in the same. It's just that one is black. I mean, one is old white man already, and one is black.
I wouldn't put it white and black.
Well, I would.
I wouldn't put it white and black because the people that were financing Diddy were, for the most part, 100% white. So I hazard the conclusion that most of the people that are being protected who went to these parties are not black, they're white. See, when you have a Hollywood set, what goes on is it's essentially an interracial thing going on up in there. And it's all kinds of lines being crossed, and you've got white significant others, black significant others, Chinese significant others, Jewish significant others, you name it. And it's just a doggone freak thing. You've got the homosexual input into the whole 9 yards, where in that industry, about 9 out of every 10 people that are involved in the Hollywood industry are on that rainbow side. So it's not what most people.
Honestly, that's a personal opinion. When if anyone, whatever conclusion they may come to with Diddy and Hugh Hefner, to me they're one and the same.
Well, it's not
minus the domestic violence of your personal relationship, but they're one and the same.
It's not quite. In other words,
he was nasty. He was a nasty old man. He manipulated young girls. They wanted to be.
Yeah, but
they wanted to be. Wait, let me say this. They wanted to be on the cover of the Playboy magazine or inside the magazine. So okay, let's be his girlfriend. But there is a documentary that came out that I watched some of it, and I'm sorry, the things that these girls said they had to do. And he gave them $1,000 a week allowance. They lived in a mansion. They couldn't save none of that money. They had to spend it. They had to spend the $1,000. They would check receipts. So he was actually paying. They were prostitutes, basically labeled.
Yeah, I know, but there is a difference. In other words, have you ever heard the term rough trade?
What about it?
You heard it.
Yes.
Okay. What does that signify? In other words, somebody prefers the rough side of things, right? Versus somebody who likes it a little bit more refined. In other words, you have a refined taste versus somebody who has a
Diddy freak offs were rough.
They were.
No, they weren't.
They were because
they were. See you.
Look.
When they were talking about
people, I represented a lot of people that were doing this kind of stuff, And there were those who would put on the night.
We're talking about Diddy's case.
I know that.
You didn't read the transcripts. I did.
What Diddy was doing was procuring. He was setting it up. If you want to get a bachelor party going on, there are ways to put the bachelor party on. And depending upon what you want in the bachelor party, you can get it. It may cost you more or less money, but it's something up to you to specify. Now,
so let me go back a little bit, because I'm trying to move this conversation along, because there's something else I want to bring up. Diddy Epstein, I think there is a connection, not so much in actual facts, but a connection of when you have very important, powerful names, whether it's on a list or whether it's on videotapes. Now, Diddy was more on the pimp stroll. Epstein was more of private jets, flying them in and out of the islands. But you go to Diddy if you want to have a good time and freak off and drugs and just express all your sexual intuitions comes out or whatever. To whereas Epstein, it was on a whole nother level where you were feeding these powerful people something that they needed, which was very more demonic than just you in a room full of adults and you just want to do some nasty stuff. So they're one and the same. Do you think?
Not quite. You ever heard of a groupie?
Yes.
Okay. Groupies hang around what? Athletes, actors, politicians. They hang around singers and people in the music industry. They have baseball groupies,
they know that are wealthy,
basketball groupies, football groupies.
A lot of times they don't have to be a celebrity. It could just be wealthy people.
Well, yeah, but they're groupies, political junkies too. They hang around political campaign headquarters.
Well, yeah, no, I get that. Yeah.
Okay, now, Diddy had groupies. Epstein didn't have groupies. See, it's interesting when you expand your bunch of groupies into getting freaks going on back in the shadows, getting them out in the open and making the freak parties bigger because you've got the groupies there and you can run money in it and expand what groupies do when they do their thing. That's like a celebrity might rent out the whole top floor of the Hilton and have a big party and trash 15, 20 rooms up there. Nobody gets up and they get their freak on up there. And there are a whole bunch of people pushing to try to get up there so they can get in with whatever is going on up there. See, there are people who want to get there. There are people who may be providing the entertainment over in the corner and they get paid for. See, I mentioned to you another type of something going on along those lines. Some of the people that are out there now being irate feminists about anti-man stuff, back in the late mid-60s, when they had a demonstration, let's say it was at Griffith Park in Los Angeles, and they were off in the back section where LAPD wasn't likely to find it, there'd be 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people out there, and these same now pious feminists would put out a quilt on the ground, strip naked, and put a sign out saying free love, anybody can have some, and people would be lined up 20 deep to have sex with them on the quilt while everybody is watching. You see, that could have been put to use. That would be the atmosphere, because if you went to one of these demonstrations or protests, you see all of this live sex going on right out in broad daylight, where everybody is naked and getting all hot, wet and bothered and sweaty. And it's going on and it's a background. I had been to functions where you walk in and it's nominally a party, except you walk through the big mansion and over there's a live sex show going on that if you wanted to, you could sit down and watch. Okay, they got paid, but that wasn't the total atmosphere. But the same thing, and then you just say, I got to get out of here because this is getting a little bit weird because I don't want to be here because there's likely to be something else I did not know this was going on. But see, what Epstein was doing is there was a select audience, invitation only, and they got to get their freak on and they got to play with young children. And they did some stuff that goes along with the sickness that comes along with their brand of power. See, sometimes people exercise power for all of the right reasons, and sometimes they have to make compromises because of the downside people. And then there are others who try to acquire and exercise power for all of the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Now,
All right. So I
the
need
other
to,
thing, one other difference, let me put this in. I think Epstein was playing a political game that had international origins, a political power game, information, blackmail, extortion, all of the rest of it. I think what Diddy was doing was just trying to maintain a level playing field for himself in an entertainment industry that's filled with blackmail moments where everybody tries to get one up on somebody so they can control the opposition within that industry. Diddy was doing that in some of the Hollywood types who wanted to fraternize with the celebrity bunch on this side, came and exposed themselves to liability. What Epstein was doing was something else where he was just getting people who were freaky, but he was doing it for strictly political purposes.
all right. So I'm gonna move on.
That would be my distinction with
Okay.
what
All right. I'm gonna move on. I gotta move on to the next topic because I'm trying to end in 20 minutes. Department of Justice is looking into prioritizing revoking citizenship for some natural say testing.
testing.
Okay, I just want to make sure I can hear. So the DOJ is looking at denaturalization for American citizens convicted of certain crimes. The Department of Justice is prioritizing revoking citizenship from some naturalized Americans who commit certain crimes. In a memo dated June 11th, Assistant Attorney General Brett Shumate is giving U.S. attorneys wide discretion to decide when to pursue the denaturalization process in order to advance the administration policy objectives. As the Trump administration pursues its ongoing immigration crackdown, attorneys are urged to prioritize cases involving individuals who pose a potential danger to national security. The memo also states that they can seek out any other cases referred to the civil division that the division determines to be significantly important to pursue. The civil division shall prioritize and maximally pursue denaturalization proceedings in all cases permitted by law and supported by the evidence. Some of the cases U.S. attorneys should pursue are those against individuals who have engaged in torture, war crimes, human trafficking, and human rights violations. While the denaturalization process and requirements are codified into law, immigration attorney Roseanne Berardi says the memo changes how aggressively the Department of Justice plans to pursue these cases. So, is this a plan to deport American citizens?
I have no idea. See, these days nobody wants to be technically precise, so they throw terms around. I don't know whether you're talking about long-term aliens who have a green card that they've had for years and years. I don't know whether we're talking about people like Werner von Braun, the father of the American space program, who was a fervent Nazi, but who was excused from what he did because of, again, national security concerns. It depends. You get a lot of people in the medical profession who are technically resident aliens, and they don't cause any problems. But if one of them behaved in an inappropriate way, yeah, okay. Is that what they're talking about? Or are they talking about people who have taken the oath and been sworn in as an American citizens? That would be something entirely different. What are we talking about? What they did with Lucky Luciano, the guy that came up with organizing the mafia into a business syndicate where they deported him back to Sicily?
Right.
What are we talking about?
Right. So it is exactly. And so reading this, when they say denaturalization, it sounds like, okay, so someone who would naturalize, these are people who immigrated here and legally, and they were naturalized and became citizens. So if you are convicted of human trafficking or war crimes or terrorism or whatever, you can be denaturalized. Denaturalized. So
Denaturalized.
Denaturalized.
Yeah, there you go.
So here's the thing. So here we have, on X, there are people, non-foundational Black Americans saying, well, Black people, Black Americans, y'all gonna be next, y'all gonna be deported. So it's that discussion, and somebody sent me this article trying to make the point of, if the Department of Justice and the Trump administration start denaturalizing Americans,
There you go.
does that include me and you, foundational Black Americans, freedmen, Negroes?
And see, foundational Black Americans is a farce. If you get several people I know that consider themselves foundational Black Americans found they had guess what in them when they finally got a DNA test.
I'm not talking about that.
No, I'm talking about
Well, everybody, even white people have something in their DNA. I'm talking about no. I'm not talking about immigrants. When I say foundational Black Americans, let's just stick to the topic. I'm talking about Negroes.
I'm not talking about immigrants.
Okay,
That's why I'm saying
so this is the question. Don't dissect FBA. Just don't. And I told you to leave that alone. The point that I'm trying to make here is Black Americans are the lineage that's here during Reconstruction and slavery. We cannot, which the 14th Amendment made us citizens, we cannot be deported. But this article,
no, you can't. They can't denaturalize you if what they're talking about is they cannot strip you of your citizenship. But naturalization also is the process, it embraces the process of leading up to citizenship. Naturalization means you are entitled to be here because you are a long-term resident alien.
Right.
Okay, so maybe that's what they're talking about. And when I'm talking about what I was going to, you were here for slavery. You were here for Reconstruction. You were here for Jim Crow. It's just your slave ancestor got it on with somebody from China who was a coolie in 1867 in Alabama building a railroad.
Let's discuss that. That at another time.
I know, but the point is,
we're not discussing DNA.
Look, I'm talking about this. What are you calling somebody who's foundational? What are you calling somebody who is a citizen? What are you calling somebody who's naturalized? It all depends, and it's got to do with how you define it. So right now, there's no firm definition for this. Any of it, foundational, anything, American citizen. Yeah, if you're born here, damn it, and your parents were citizens, then it is absolute. If you are born in the continental United States on American soil, you are an American citizen and you can run for president. No question about it.
If you are an anchor baby?
Now, Now, I said if your parents or a parent was an
The
American
parent that gave
citizen
birth
and
to
you were
you
born,
is not well. We're not talking, but see,
I'm not talking about
all
anchor
right
baby.
then.
That I
So
think that's not what I didn't say that. I just said if you're an American citizen who was born here on American soil with an American parent or parents, American, meaning U.S. citizens, you're an absolute citizen. They cannot strip you of your citizenship. That's one thing. My former mother-in-law had been here. If she was still alive, she would have been here 63 years, but she was a citizen of Canada. She was just a permanent resident alien working in the medical profession.
okay.
All right. So it depends on what you're calling this. Anchor babies are something that were developed way after the purpose of that provision of the 14th Amendment had been rectified. It was to overcome and overturn the Dred Scott decision. That was the reason they put it in there, for that specific one and only purpose, Dred Scott. And once that was achieved, there was no reason to extend it to anybody else. But like a number of things, you have these old decrepit laws that are on the books, and they stay on the books, and they should be repealed. But they weren't.
So okay. So one last thing. Black elites. And I'm going to zero in on a time period, Black elite. So I love this show. It's called The Gilded Age on HBO. Love it. And because it's about the Gilded Age when the Vanderbilts and the Astors, it was that time period. So this is time period during Reconstruction. So this is before the Titanic, and this is before the crash of 1912. We are still in the what?
Is it 1929 and 1912 you're talking about?
1912 was that Titanic. When was the crash?
The
No, it was a
Titanic,
crash in I think 1990 something.
they had some recessions, severe recessions, yes.
Anyway,
Okay.
this
Fair
was
enough.
during Reconstruction era. So this was, the Vanderbilts, the new money versus the old money, the Gilded Age, right? Here in America. So I love this show on HBO. So what they also incorporate characters, Black characters of, Negro, the Black people of that time. So there is a character, and let me just share this here real quick. Yeah. So, let me put, yeah. So the Gilded Age cast and creator talk finally exploring the Black elite. This is in season 3. And this character, she's a writer, he's a doctor. Her father was a slave. When slavery ended, he came up north, went to school in Philadelphia, became a pharmacist, opened up a pharmacy, and they lived in Brooklyn. And this is actual facts that during that time, it was a very upper middle class community in Brooklyn. I believe it was around the Dumbo area. And so, her mom was stay-at-home mom or whatever, but her mother was never a slave, her mother's side, but the father was. But, he pulled himself up by the bootstraps and became a successful Black man. The doctor here, he's part of the Kirtland legacy of Rhode Island, and he's a doctor. His lineage, mother and father, were never slaves, right? They were part of, one of their relatives on the mother's side was in the American Revolution, the Black person who sing one of the instruments or whatever. So this is real life as well. So these are the characters that they're playing. So it just so happened the episode that aired this past Sunday, in one of the scenes, the mother of the doctor, who were never slaves, right? And they're all from Rhode Island, kind of looked down on the black girl's family, still upper middle class, because the father was a former slave, right? So I wanted to ask you, when we talk about the black elites, and it kind of plays out a little bit today. So you talk about the non-slave blacks versus the enslaved blacks. So when slavery ended and the era of Reconstruction, which was the Gilded Age for the wealthy white people, but just staying black here, what was that dynamic during that time under Reconstruction, non-black versus former enslaved blacks? Was there a disconnect to where they didn't want to associate?
Was a disdain for anybody that needed Master Lincoln, the 13th Amendment, or the Emancipation Proclamation to get free.
Say that again.
There was a disdain by free black folk who looked down on Negroes who had to rely upon the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, or Master Lincoln to get free, feeling that something was lacking because they didn't have the personal character to get themselves free. That was an attitude.
Now, are you familiar with the black elite out of Rhode
Yes,
Island during
very.
the Reconstruction?
Not Rhode Island, but elsewhere in the
Well,
country. Yes.
I'm talking about Newport, because there were part.
That was at the other end of the Underground Railroad. They got up there and nobody was going to catch them and take them back to slavery. That's what that Dred Scott thing was about.
But these were free black people.
Yeah. There were free black people in other parts of the country too.
Right, but they
There was a
never,
bunch of
when I say free black people, they never had to escape slavery, because they were never.
well, they had either escaped or they didn't have to escape because an ancestor had gotten free. There was a whole bunch of them down in Florida. They were products of escaped slaves and Seminole Indians. So there was that. There were black people that had bought themselves out. There were a few who never could have been slaves because when they got captured and brought over to America by the U.S. Constitution, the international slave trade had been ended. So they couldn't be kept as slaves. There were some that were. There were some people that engaged in an interesting traffic, like Jim Bowie, the person that invented the famous Bowie knife. He and his partners had a thing that bring over illegal contraband black folk who were captured too late to be enslaved. And what they would do is they would turn each other in. They would be seized by the government and they would be declared contraband because nobody would stand for them. So they would bid on them and acquire title to the property that was contraband. And that was a little thing that some of the people, Jim Bowie, by the way, is one of the people that went down at the Alamo. He is one of the founders of Texas. So a little history on that. But anyway,
it's more like, so Booker T. Washington, he was a former slave. W.B. Du Bois, I don't think he was. He didn't come.
Frederick Douglass was, but Frederick Douglass violently escaped.
Right. So again, so like a W.B. Du Bois, who did not come from enslaved parents.
He was born after slavery. He was born too late to be a slave.
He was born at 1868, but was his parents slaves?
Don't know.
I'm looking it up now. I don't think so. Let's see something. No. So W.B. Du Bois, he was born February 23rd, 1868 in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. So that's not far from Rhode Island, right underneath. Rhode Island is underneath Massachusetts, to Alfred and Mary Sylvana Du Bois. Mary, his mom, family was part of a very small free black population of Great Barrington and had long owned land in the state. She was descended from Dutch, African, and English ancestors. William Dubois, maternal great great grandfather, was Tom Bogart, a slave born in West Africa who was held by a Dutch colonist, Conrad Burgat. Tom briefly served in a Continental Army during the American Revolution War, which may have been how he gained his freedom during the late 18th century. So, okay, so his father.
In other words, your ancestors got free by one way or
But the
another.
mother, his mother was always free. And if a child is born to the mom who, if she was enslaved, then your child enslaved. If she was free, then your child will be considered free. So
Yeah, that's why the Seminole Indian Scouts were bivouacked with white troops in the U.S. Army on the frontier, because their mothers were free women. They were Seminole Indians. They were
So let
not
me say this.
slaves.
So also, so Booker T. Washington, he was born a slave, both his parents. And when slavery ended, he
Acted like
discovered
one.
Tuskegee Institute. He was one of the founders. So again, black elite, because Booker T, you could say he was part of the elite, but
Well, let me say on Booker T, a lot of the black elite couldn't stand him because his job was to destroy any upcoming young black man or woman who was not going to go along and play into the segregation game. So my family could not stomach him. They hated him with a passion. And
well, I don't want to go too far.
he did a lot of damage. So just look at it this way. To give you, if you want to see the real historical perspective on Booker T. Washington, he would be the 125-year ago equivalent of Al Sharpton or Cory Booker.
Right. So with that said, because Al Sharpton, Cory Bookers, they are amongst the quote unquote elite, but a different type of. But let me just finish. But a different type of mentality. A different. So just going back into time during Reconstruction, the black elite, when you had blacks who were never enslaved, who were born free, came from free parents, or at least one of their parents, versus the black elites who did come from slavery.
Yeah, well, I know about that.
So the point that I'm trying to come to, the conclusion I'm coming to, or the question I kind of want to ask, the difference in the mindset, how, okay, we're all free. Matter of fact, we're all professionals. We're all upper middle class, or maybe some is wealthy or whatever, but it's a small community of, you would say, the talented 10th of that time, but they still looked at someone's background as being less than.
Yeah, it was true. I'm telling you that was the case. In other words, if you had to be freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, 13th Amendment, Master Lincoln, or Union Army, you were looked down on, versus those who did not need that to become free.
But those who did not need that to become free, it was just a circumstance of who they were born to at that time and where they were born.
Okay, you're the King of England. You popped out of a royal twat, so that's a circumstance of your birth. You're Queen Elizabeth. You're Queen of England, now dead. What nookie did you pop out of? You're Queen Victoria. What nookie did you pop out of? You can go back.
I think so. All right. So I think so. What I'm saying here is, so yeah. So it just so happened you popped out of a free twat. Right, the so-called right nookie. However, you should not look down on someone because their background, was less than you, even though, because they worked their way up to match you or even surpass you. So just fast forward that now, here. Let me just
Well,
let me
wait a
just
minute.
say this
Hold
last
on,
thing.
hold on.
Just fast forward that now to 2025 when we have the Jasmines and the Cory Bookers and the Al Sharptons, right? They act like they're not looking down, but they are looking down by their actions.
Al Sharpton doesn't have a background to look down on. Cory Booker doesn't have a
But
background to look down on.
they don't say it, but they do it
They
by
are
their
part
actions.
of
They
it.
do it by their actions.
But
By
see,
selling out the
that's
black race.
nouveau. That would be nouveau riche if they had some money. But here's the way it goes. Look, you can find China, you can find Europe, you can find Africa, you can find South America, you can find North America. Humanity has put great store in who your parents are. If you go to Africa, the tribes have hierarchies, they have royalties, they have the tribal chieftains, the district chieftains, the sub chieftains. You're Africa. You're in China. The emperor, the dynasty decides from that. You have the kings in Europe. You have the potentates in the Middle East. You have the
What's your point?
pharaohs and the
Let's get to the
kings.
point.
All humanity adds a store to who you were born to. The underlying theory is that these people who are the kings, potentates, the sultans, the rulers were superior humans. And if we have more children by them, that will improve the tribe, the nation, the state of humanity. So we encourage that. They are successful. And the more successful people we have, the better for the tribe. The tribe becomes more successful. You can look biblically. You can look everywhere in the world, and people honor and look up to the nobility. Now, whether you're in Rome, Greece, whether you're in Persia, it doesn't make any difference. That's the rule. Whether you're here in America and you're the chief's son, it's the rule. So black folk want to reject that, but they didn't. So what was going on is within this elite, the ones that did not need to be freed looked down on the ones that did, because we understand, if you're from that background, that there is something inherently disgraceful and distasteful about needing to be freed from slavery rather than getting yourself free. It's just the thing. So, I mean, it's a long remove. It's how many years? 135 plus 20, 155, 160 years since the Civil War was finished up. And things have mellowed down a little bit, and you can't tell. But back 100 years ago, you could, because it was grandparents who were around in slavery, and they knew whether they had to be freed or not, or they got free. And there's something about getting yourself free that gave you a status in the black community in the 1870s, because people knew.
So they look at you as a badass, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
One last thing, just real quick. He really needs to be put up on charges. He started that war in Gaza to avoid the trial that they were supposed to have for him as a war criminal last year, 2 years ago. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu U.S. visit sparks massive protests outside the White House demanding his ICC arrest and an end to U.S. military aid. Yeah, so people are protesting outside of the White House. But
That's nothing new.
new, and it's their right to do that, but he does, I don't know.
See, you have to look at some things. read Menachem Begin's autobiography. I don't know if he actually wrote it, but it's styled as that. He was a commando in the British Army in World War II, an officer. And in his autobiography, he talks about all of the individuals he personally assassinated, all of the people he killed by setting bombs in mosques, schools, hospitals, and marketplaces. And he would qualify as a terrorist, but he was the prime minister of Israel, and he was also the person that Jimmy Carter worked through on the Israeli side to come up with a treaty with Egypt, which was secured through Anwar Sadat, who was the president of Egypt. That has worked an interesting thing that put Egypt, Israel, the United States on the same side, along with Saudi Arabia, so that they could bring some order to what was complete chaos in the Middle East with its great oil producing potential.
Well,
And it's not a matter whether it's fair, likable, admirable, or not. Menachem Begin was a terrorist by any definition, by his own admission.
all right. Thank you, Judge.
So what are you getting with Netanyahu? See, the main problem with what's going on right there is Israel has taken this thing of we will not be defeated and rebuked. Israel has an ongoing contention of 75, 80, maybe 100 years, depending upon where you start tracking this, with Islam in the Middle East. Islam can keep losing and it's not going to go away. And it may eventually prevail. If it ever prevails, Israel will go away. And Israel doesn't want that. There is this fortress known as Masada, and there is the Masada thing where when it looked like they were going to be overwhelmed by the Roman legion that was charged with besieging the Masada fortress, they all committed suicide rather than being captured. So Netanyahu has already indicated that Israel, if it looks like it will be overwhelmed, will do the Masada thing. Everybody's going. We'll take as many down as we can. And they have nukes. So somewhere before it gets to they eventually lose, which is almost inevitable, somebody needs to do something about it. Because look at this thing they've got going right now with Iran. This is the longest struggle they've ever had. And when you juxtapose it with what was going on with what came out of Palestine, their typical dust up last week, 2 weeks. This went on for a year and a half without resolution. It's getting bad when that kind of thing happens. And what is going on the Islamic side is they've discovered what the United States of America discovered 250 years ago. You may not be able to stand up to a mighty international power on a battlefield, but you sure as the devil can fight a guerrilla war that this international power is not going to be able to stand up to. That's what Great Britain ran into when the American colonies rebelled. That's why we are a nation today, because it worked. So everybody has copied our revolution. What those folk did in Gaza is copied the American model from 1775 on up. And it was working. They still haven't been subdued.
Okay. Thank you. Great show. Thank you, Judge. Happy birthday again. Thank you, guys. And listen, thank you. I didn't reach the goal, but I still appreciate you guys supporting. Thank you, Miss Magic. And thank you to Where There's Smoke, There's Fire. Awesome commentary. We appreciate you. Happy birthday. Thank you so much. And Jab says, "Ugh, that was Dana, it's a funny shadow behind you going up and down. That's my ceiling fan, and you see the shadow behind me because it's twirling around, so it's like moving. So yeah.
I thought it was a
A
haint.
what? What's
A
that?
haint. HAINT, as in a haunt,
Oh,
a ghost, a spook, a demon, or something. The shadow
no,
lurking.
no, I don't believe in ghosts. Because if you do see a ghost, that's an evil spirit. Because once you're gone from here, you're gone. Um,
I had a grandmama from New Orleans. She know them
yeah, no, that's
things.
that voodoo shit. But anyway, good night, everybody. Thank you, Judge. All
All
right.
right.
Good night, guys. See you later. Bye. Let me get the outro ready. Bye, everybody. Oh, hit that like button. I didn't reach 1,000 likes. Hit that like button, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and have a wonderful week. Bye.